Welcome back to another episode of Grizzly True Crime. My name is Xana Kernodle, and this video is just a quick recap of what I've already discussed in a live stream. If you ever feel like these live streams are too long for me, don't worry, because if you do click on them, they are all time-stamped for you. I literally highlight key moments. You can skip forwards or backwards to exactly the moment that you want to see. So that would be in the pinned comments in the description box, or if you hover over the video. It's really easy to navigate. So do check out some of the live streams that I do, because I try to make it as user-friendly as possible, because I myself do not want to see anything that's longer than like 20 or 30 minutes or so generally. But if there's timestamps, I love it. So I hope that you love it too. So what we're looking at here is this news of Bryan Kohberger, the suspect that's been arrested in the Idaho case. If you know nothing about this Idaho 4 case, I would highly recommend checking out the playlist that I've made for you, which is linked in the description box for you. But just quick recap, 4 University of Idaho students were brutally murdered in their off-campus college home in Moscow, Idaho on November 13th, 2022. So their names are Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. So here, Bryan Kohberger was arrested on December 30th, 2022, and we've been following along as all these updates come out. So whenever there's solid news or documents or updates, I definitely am keeping track of this case. A lot of rabbit holes, a lot of questions, a lot of theories out there, and generally, while I look at a lot of those as well, I bring you what I can bring factually as much as possible. So here they say, the state of Idaho plaintiff versus Bryan C. Kohberger indictment. So really what's happened is he's been indicted by a grand jury. What was going to happen was a preliminary hearing, and that was set to last for a week. And now by being indicted by a grand jury, there no longer will be a preliminary hearing. A lot of people are confused because they think now that it's secret, which a grand jury, indictment usually is. So they're like, it's happening in secret, and now they don't trust it, and now what does it mean? But what it means is, instead of the preliminary hearing, there was a grand jury indictment, okay? So the case was presented by the prosecutor to a grand jury, and they decided, yes, this can go to trial. And so what they've charged Bryan Kohberger with, they say Bryan C. Kohberger is accused by the grand jury of Latah County by this indictment of the crimes of burglary, okay, they've got all the codes there, felony count 1, and then murder in the first degree 4 times, one for each victim, of course. So count 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is what he is being accused of, and with a grand jury indictment, it means, okay, they're ready to say this needs to proceed to go to trial. So instead of this preliminary hearing starting on May 22nd, what's happening now is that Bryan Kohberger will be arraigned on Monday, May 22nd, 2023. So what happens there is he's going to be arraigned, he's going to plead guilty or not guilty, and a trial date will be set, which could happen this year at some point. So that is what we are all anticipating for Monday, May 22nd, 2023. I thought I would quickly show you this article that I found, which is from prisonprofessor.com. I will link it in the description box for you, but it really helps break down all of this. Like, what does it mean? What can we expect? And they say, what happens after a federal criminal indictment? A federal criminal indictment is one of the most challenging situations for anyone to endure. There's a difference between indicted versus convicted. An indictment is not a conviction, although statistics show that federal prosecutors are highly successful in convicting the vast majority of people indicted. 2019 data from the Pew Research Center showed that federal prosecutors' conviction rate is over 99.5%. The consequences of a criminal conviction are severe. They include criminal monetary penalties, loss of liberty, and irreparable reputational harm. An indictment is a serious matter. It means that after a criminal investigation, prosecutors believe they have enough evidence to convict. Therefore, people under federal indictment must understand the difference between being indicted versus charged, which I'm sure Bryan Kohberger understands, seeing as he was a criminal justice PhD student, and the process that follows after an indictment. The criminal process can take a year or more to get from indictment to a final resolution. So, in my opinion, I still think it could be a year or two to get to the trial, just based on these things always taking time. But I see many people are hopeful that this trial will actually happen this year. So let's see. If there are going to be cameras in the courtroom and if the trial will be streamed, I'm going to be covering it. Oh yes, absolutely. So they say legally there's a difference between being indicted versus being charged. The difference lies in the process leading to the criminal charges and who filed them. Prosecutors typically file charges, and not all charges result in a formal indictment, but only a grand jury can formally indict, and all indictments contain charges. So, does indicted mean charged? Yes, indicted means formally charged by a grand jury with a felony. In his case, 5 felonies. Okay, so they say keep reading ahead. So this again, I'm going to put this in the description box if you want to read through all of this. What I'm going to do now quickly is go to what is a grand jury indictment. They say a federal indictment, also known as presentment or true bill or grand jury indictment, is a formal accusation that a person has committed a federal crime. The indictment is the most commonly used criminal charging document. To obtain an indictment, prosecutors must present factual evidence to a grand jury in a secret proceeding where they can call witnesses and present evidence obtained with grand jury subpoenas. For this reason, indictments are often called grand jury indictments. Since the grand jury is a secret process, most people under criminal investigation know nothing about the grand jury proceedings leading to the indictment. So this must have caught him by surprise because we've seen him pipe up here and there now. He's got a fleet of death penalty qualified attorneys. But yes, now he's been indicted by a grand jury. The grand jury consists of 16 to 23 randomly selected jurors investigating crimes and deciding whether to file formal charges. At least 16 of the 23 members of the grand jury must be present to conduct business, and at least 12 jurors must vote to indict. At that point, the grand jury issues an indictment describing the criminal charges against the accused and the factual basis for those charges. An indictment follows once the grand jury has considered the evidence and decided sufficient cause for the prosecution to proceed exists. Okay, so if we skip ahead here to arraignment, which is what's happening with Bryan Kohberger on Monday, May 22nd, the defendant also has the right to arraignment after arrest. At an arraignment, a magistrate judge officially informs the defendant of the charges. The defendant also enters a plea of guilty or not guilty. Under the Federal Speedy Trial Act, the defendant has the right to trial within 70 days from the arraignment. So let's see if that happens. I know it depends per state how long that actually is. Therefore, if necessary, the court will set a trial date at this time. The arraignment is the judicial proceeding that officially starts the trial process. Often, the initial appearance and arraignment take place at the same time, soon after an arrest. So preliminary hearing, they're not doing that. Okay, and so he's going to either plead guilty or not guilty. And here, I like this, we do have bullet points and numbered lists. So they say 5 key takeaways. Indictment is not a conviction. A federal indictment is not a criminal conviction. Rather, it represents the beginning of a formal process that can consume a year or more of a person's life. The indictment is only the first step in a federal criminal prosecution, and getting from there to a final resolution of a criminal charge takes time, resilience, and focused effort. To convict, prosecutors have to obtain a unanimous verdict from 12 jurors after a trial. Prosecutors alone cannot indict. The fact that the U.S. Constitution requires a grand jury to indict a fellow citizen is a reminder of the severity of the matter. The grand jury indictment requirement is there to act as a safeguard against overzealous prosecutors. So that's good to know, because a lot of people are saying, well, isn't this an overzealous prosecutor? Like, isn't this shady? But it's not shady from what I can gather. 3. Prosecutors control the grand jury process. The somber truth is that it does not take much for prosecutors to overcome the grand jury indictment requirement. Prosecutors alone control the grand jury process, and neither the accused nor the defense counsel participate in the process. So if you didn't know that, Kohberger and his defense team did not participate then in this grand jury indictment. Prosecutors present all of the evidence and instruct the grand jury on the law and the process. Not surprisingly, prosecutors rarely lose at the grand jury. Hence, the common refrain is that prosecutors can indict a ham sandwich. 4. To charge more quickly, prosecutors use other tools. Prosecutors can file a criminal complaint or an information much more quickly than getting an indictment from a grand jury. When prosecutors need to move quickly in making an arrest, they can file a criminal complaint or information and go to the grand jury after the defendant is under arrest. The defendant can then choose to waive the grand jury requirement and proceed by information instead of an indictment. However, a felony case cannot go forward based on a criminal complaint alone, as this violates a person's Fifth Amendment rights. 5. After indictment, federal conviction rate is over 95%. Can you beat an indictment? The reality is that prosecutors have significant resources and many advantages in the criminal justice process. As a result, it's hard to beat a federal indictment. The numbers do not lie. The relevant statistics show that federal prosecutors are highly successful in convicting the vast majority of people indicted. In fact, about 97% of federal criminal defendants end up taking a guilty plea. Damn. And the conclusion here is that being indicted is a terrifying experience for most people. The consequences of an indictment and possible criminal conviction are severe, as many federal crimes can result in lengthy prison sentences or the death penalty in his case. Other penalties include fines, assessments, forfeiture, restitution, and irreparable reputational harm, or again, I say the death penalty for Kohberger. And so they conclude by saying an indictment is the beginning, not the end of the process. So thank you to prisonprofessors.com for this very informative article. I like articles that help break all the legal terms and processes and everything down, especially because things do vary state by state. And sometimes, I'm South African living in the Netherlands, and sometimes understanding all this about the US law and all that, it's kind of complicated at times, right? So this has been very helpful. I hope it's helped you as well. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you want to just check out the playlist and catch up over there, I will link that in the description box for you. And I would highly recommend checking out the episode that I did. It's a live stream that I did. It was 2 hours and 2 minutes, I think. Everything is chaptered out and timestamped for you. But that was very interesting. Also discussing it with Sunny Slaughter, a litigation and law enforcement expert. So do check that out. Hear what she's got to say as well. I will link it for you in the pinned comments and in the description box. And I will see you in the next one. Stay safe.